with the communications, and now we are all here, so we can start. Okay, this third session we are going to focus on value added, and this panel. First of all, Fabio Bertoni from the Politecnico di Milano, and he belongs to the VICO team as well. In fact, he's done most of the coordination work in the process of developing all the different work packages. He will address a speech with some slides and some and also to raise some questions. And then we have Pertti Valtonen from the government of Finland. He's been devoting more than 20 years in devising and creating and designing venture capital programs in Finland. And in fact, he's going to show us a new future as he defines it. And so he will show us the public perspective of a public venture capital scheme. And then we'll move also to Nuria Bosch. She has a mixed experience, private and public, because she was former responsible for entrepreneurial programs in the Catalonia government. And with the change, she lasted for two mandates. When there was a change in the government, she moved to the private sector. Now she is the investment director at Baring Private Equity Partners, so she will share both views. And also we have Daniel Sanchez from Nauta Capital. He is general partner at Nauta Capital. Is a venture capital firm investing in high-tech companies, with an office in Barcelona and Boston. And he has experience in M&A, in Alpha Corporate, also in industry at Taurus, and he is now the general manager partner at Nauta Capital, with extensive experience of internationalization of firms and business development as well. So we'll start with Fabio, and then we'll proceed with a presentation with the new program from Finland. And then we'll open discussion about selection and value added and differential perspectives from the private and public sector regarding value added. Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you all for being here. Okay, so the title of this session is Policy Measures to Improve Selection and Value Added in Europe. So I thought that a good way to introduce this session is to understand what's wrong with selection and value added in Europe. So that's a good point to start with, and why. So before I get into the details, I want just to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. So which are the takeaways of this short speech? So regarding selection, essentially what I'm going to say is that matching in Europe between venture capitalists and companies is not as effective as it is somewhere else, namely in the United States, and that the reason is the thinness of the market. The reason why the market is thin, well, there are several reasons, especially fragmentation and limited harmonization, especially regarding tax laws and other, especially regarding laws. And third, the role of public venture capital is unclear regarding whether it's good or not to improve the effectiveness of selection. And second topic is value added. First point that I'm gonna raise is that VC adds value to companies. So companies which get VC really see their value improved. So there's really value in it. We already know, and these are the results that the VICO project has found, confirms this evidence. What we add to this existing evidence, or what we highlight, is that this value addition, this value enhancement of VC varies enormously across VCs. So different VCs really differ enormously regard to this respect. And finally, again, the role of public VC is unclear, is ambiguous. Okay, so let me go to selection. What's the idea behind selection? Well, the US story, so the story we are used to, is essentially that, well, VC is smart money, and smart money chases good companies. So that essentially when you see VC-backed companies outperforming their peers, So other companies which are not VC-backed, part of that is just because these companies are inherently better. So that's what selection is. Econometric evidence in the US largely supports this view and shows that if you compare VC-backed companies with other companies, these companies would be better even without VC. With VC, they are even better, but they are better than the others. What about Europe? Well, econometric analysis that we run, but also other people outside the VICO project, so it's not something which is totally new of the VICO project, but which comes much strongly from this project, is that the extent to which VC-backed companies are better than other companies is much lower in Europe than in the US. So it looks like this paradigm that smart money gets good companies or get better companies or the best companies, that doesn't apply that strictly in Europe as it does in the United States. So we ask why. Well, first, let me set the record straight of why, I mean, some reasons why that really don't explain this conundrum. First, it doesn't seem to be a supply side issue. Because, I mean, one of the reasons why you might say that the smart money doesn't get the best companies in Europe is that money is not smart in the first place. That could be an explanation. But it doesn't seem to be the case because, I mean, if you look at the effect of VC on VC-backed companies, it's big. It's even bigger than what you find in the US. So that doesn't really, I mean, this makes the explanation that European VC is dump money instead than smart money. It essentially makes this explanation full. So that doesn't really seem to be a supply side issue. I mean, it's not, at least not supply side issue which has to do with the quality of VC in Europe. Second, it's hardly a demand side issue as well, at least regarding, I mean, we all know, we also talked about that yesterday, that European entrepreneurs are reluctant to share control with VC. There are cultural barriers, there are private benefits of control, which are amplified when you have poor laws protecting investors, so everything is well known, but this is not sufficient by itself to explain why the best companies don't look for VC. Because, I mean, this applies to every company, that doesn't really apply only to the good ones. So this should decrease the propensity of entrepreneurs in general to look for VC, not just the good ones. So again, this explanation doesn't really seem to be valid. One explanation which seems to be valid, and actually this is one of the findings of our project, is that it could be the result of the thinness of the market. So the idea is the following. Well, first, one exercise that academics sometimes forget to do is that if you want to know why something is happening, why entrepreneurs are not doing something or are doing something, the first thing that you can do is go to entrepreneurs and ask. So that's what we did. So we went to entrepreneurs, and essentially we interviewed some, and then we sent also a survey to entrepreneurs. Now, what we found out is that essentially we asked to entrepreneurs, have you ever bothered to look for VC? Have you ever written a business plan to get VC money? So what we found out is that even though most of them say that they are financially constrained, so they would need more money to make innovative investments, most of them say, no, we never looked for VC, really. So we ask, why is it? And essentially what they say is that it's too hard to get it. Since it's so unlikely that we will get VC because there's so little VC out there, there's no real value in spending time on preparing a business plan and having a roadshow. It's like buying a lottery ticket. We just won't do that. I mean, we would like to win the lottery, but it's too unlikely. So we don't do that. Now, what's interesting there is that it's really the best companies which have the higher incentive not to look for VC because, I mean, they can survive. Because they are so good, they don't really need VC to survive. They can, I mean, they will be slowed down, their investments will be slowed down, their development will be slower without VC, but they can survive. I mean, they can survive in the market even without VC. So you have this share of very good companies which are good enough not to need VC, and since they know that VC is in very scarce supply, they don't go on the market for VC. So essentially this means that the quality of the deal flow when the market is thin, is lower, because the best companies don't even look for VC. So they just disappear from the market. So that these star companies almost disappear for VC. Now, what's interesting is that this essentially this creates a perverse equilibrium where you have the good companies don't look for VC because they think they will not get it, and VC knows that the best companies are not there because VC knows this is a rational equilibrium, so VC knows that good companies won't look for VC, so that the quality of the deal flow will be low, and so that VC doesn't develop, and companies know that VC won't develop, so essentially you get in a vicious equilibrium. Now, the problem with when you have an equilibrium, or you have multiple equilibria, is that to move from one equilibrium to another, it tends to be pretty complicated. And normally what you have to do to move from one bad equilibrium to a good equilibrium is that you need policies, both on the supply and on the demand side, to move to another equilibrium. You can't really move only one of those. Well, why is Europe a market thing in the first place? Well, there are several possible explanations which came to my mind. Some of those which seem to be reasonable. Then if you look deeper, they are not so reasonable. First is that, well, it's just that it's not developed enough. So essentially, this is not really an explanation. But the point is that, as I will show in the next slide, that's not really 100% true. Second, could be because of geographical diversity, border effect, or fragmentation. So let's start from development. Now, if you take only early stage deals in Europe and the US, last year you had 3.5 billion euro invested in Europe and $7 billion in the US, which is around 3 basis points of GDP in Europe and around 5 basis points of GDP in the US. So essentially, European VC is 2/3 of what you have in the US. Well, last year was not really representative. If you take other years, really these numbers change a lot. But that's pretty much the number. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at R&D expenses, well, again, Europe is around 2/3 of what's the R&D expenses in the US. So, I mean, VC is less developed in Europe than in the US, but it's not less developed in terms of, I mean, if you compare it to what's the R&D in Europe. So, I mean, the development of VC is not low if you compare it to what's the R&D which is being pursued in Europe. So it's reasonable. You wouldn't expect to have higher VC in Europe if you take into account that we have less research and development here. So you shouldn't really observe a higher VC from this perspective. So the idea that VC is not enough developed for the type of for the amount of research that we have here is not really out there. Well, geographical diversity. Another thing which is often said is that VC. One of the reasons why one of the problems with VC is that VC is not. I mean, if you fund your company in some parts of Europe, it's very hard to get VC money because VC is not there, which is true. But that, I mean, you have a huge diversity between countries. Like if you take the UK and Italy, that there's a lot of differences in the availability of VC money, and also within countries. If you take Spain and you take Catalonia and Andalusia, there's a lot of differences. But I mean that's true even in the US. I mean VC is not evenly available in the US as well. So I mean geographical diversity is, I mean it's natural for VC because VC has positive externalities. So it really makes sense for VCs to cluster in geographically limited regions. Well, fragmentation. Well, that's definitely an issue that the US doesn't have. The European market is fragmented, across different dimensions: language, regulation, trade tradition, financial system. It's not really easy for an Italian to establish a company in Germany. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's much harder for me to establish a company, I don't know, in Germany or in the UK or in Spain, rather than a company in Italy, because I don't know the language, the rules are different, the laws are different. I mean, there's kind of an informational step for me to overcome, so that really the market is fragmented. And the same is for VC investors. I mean, a Spanish VC investor who wants to invest in Italy, I mean, it's not the same as investing in Spain. He's not sure it's going to be the same. There are some laws he might not know, and I mean, why should he bother? So I mean, there's there's kind of this information step again, which must be overcome. So we have this border effect. If we look at evidence from the VICO data set, about 16% of VC investments in young high-tech companies are cross-border. I mean, is it a high number or a low number? I don't know. But anyway, it's hardly going to be enough to offset alone cross-country differences. Now, what's a huge difference between Europe and the US is that you have very, very limited mobility of entrepreneurs here. I mean, if an Italian starts up a company, it's going to be 99% of the times a company in Italy. Maybe somewhere in Italy, like in the north or in the south, so maybe that an entrepreneur from the south will move to the north. But it's very unlikely that, I mean, that doesn't happen often that an entrepreneur from the south just moves to, I don't know, the UK because VC is more developed up there. It happens, but not very often. Actually, according to my experience, what happens is that sometimes in Italy, when you fund a company and it's a very successful company, VC helps you move to the Silicon Valley. So they say, okay, your company is a good company. I will give you a couple of millions so that you develop your product better. And when your product is good enough to attract attention from the real guys, which are the ones in the Silicon Valley, you go there. So the problem there is that we don't only have fragmentation in Europe, but we also have to face the globalization of the industry. So that's another tricky issue. Now, is this fragmentation gap closing? Well, part of this fragmentation gap is due to different policies that we observe throughout Europe. It doesn't really seem to be closing. If you look at this picture, is this a laser? Yes. Well, these bubbles that you see here, these are essentially, that's kind of a plot where you have European countries, and over the vertical axis, you have well, let's start from the horizontal axis. The horizontal axis is how important are subsidies compared to structural reforms in different countries, and you see a lot of variation. Some countries are more subsidies-based, the others are more structural-based reforms, and but you really see that some countries focused on some dimensions of policy intervention, like, I don't know, financial markets. Other really were focused on different dimensions, like, I don't know, tax incentives for R&D. So really you see a lot of differences among countries. And you can't really explain these differences only on the basis that these countries are different in the first place. So that the coherence between what a country is missing and which are the policies which this country is enacting, this predictive power is really low. So you can't really explain from the perspective of a VC why a particular country is doing a particular policy. So if you look at Europe and you think about it, doing business in Europe, Europe is not really comparable to a country. It's like a puzzle. You have different pieces and you don't know how to like hinge one to another. Now, what's the role of public VC regarding selection? Well, it's kind of ambiguous. On the positive side, since public VC is anyway a VC, this makes the supply of money more, it increases the supply of money, which is good because it's moving at least one of the two parts of the equilibrium from the bad towards the good state. So that could be a good thing. Well, on the negative side, if you look at where public VC invests, and you see it over where is it? There. The vertical axis there. Well, public VC is over there, which means that it's the investor which is most localized. So it's the least likely to invest somewhere else. In another country. So the vast majority of investments which are made by public venture capital are made locally. Which, from the perspective of the internationalization and the reduction of fragmentation, it's kind of a problem because the supply of public VC is not necessarily due to the reason that in that particular part of Europe there's a good deal flow. So the reason why you have a particular distribution of public VC is in part due to political reasons. So hardly a good thing for promoting internationalization. So let me move to value added. Well, first question, that's really basic. Well, but does VC add value to its portfolio companies? Well, the answer is yes. We made studies on different dimensions of firm performance, like growth, innovation, productivity, investments, and essentially what we found in a nutshell is that VC adds a lot of value to these companies. So these companies are really worth more when they get VC than when they don't get it. And this is not just due to the fact that, I mean, if you give 1 million euro to a company, this company will be 1 million euro worthier than it would be otherwise. There's a lot of additional value that VC puts in place. Well, so this is the result that you find if you pull all VCs together and you look at the average impact, so the average treatment effect of VC. It's positive and it's big. Now, the point here is that, well, there is no such thing as an average VC. So this average is really made out of VCs which are incredibly different one another. Well, where does this value added come, by the way? It comes from well, helping companies in recruiting managers, putting some budget discipline, or anyway, basic accounting, cost accounting, for instance, business experience, which often these entrepreneurs lack, especially in high tech, industry experience, network of contacts, which is incredibly important for this company, access to bank financing. There's evidence that when you get VC money, it's much easier to get money from anybody else, including banks. And, well, helping internationalization, especially when the VC is international. Okay, well, let me give you just one picture to show how different can this value added be. Okay, so that's the growth rate. That's the size of a company that's compared to the same company without VC. Essentially what this number means is that if you look at like 3 years after you get VC, which is this point here, on average a company is 1.5 times larger if it gets VC than if it didn't. So that VC really increases the size of these companies, help these companies grow much faster. Okay, so this is for the average VC. If you split this sample in 2 types of VCs, first, independent VC firm, so the typical Silicon Valley style VC, what you see is that the impact is much bigger than the one that you see before. So let me show that like that. So you see that the impact is much bigger and is also pretty quick. So after a couple of years, you had most of the impact. So what this picture says is that really when you get independent VC money, your company will grow and it will grow quick. But if you get another type of VC, that's corporate VC. So that's a venture capital company which is established by an industrial corporation. Now the impact is much different. It's much smoother, and overall in the long term it's weaker. Now what this tells us is that, okay, there's a positive impact of VC on growth and on other measures. I mean, other measures of performance are pretty much the same, but it really differs a lot depending on who's the VC we're talking about. Okay, what's interesting there is what for public VC, which is a particular type of VC. Well, results are kind of, to say the least, nuanced. Well, they're not very nuanced, actually. What we find is that essentially there's no positive impact, but for very special cases. So that if you compare public VC with any other type of VC, what you observe is that usually public VC has a much weaker effect on the performance of these companies. So what I mean by public VC, I mean a venture capital company which has been established by a public body, a government or a local agency, and this public body is also responsible for the management of the funds. So it's not like an umbrella fund or a fund of fund. It's direct fund managed by bureaucrats. So what we observe is that really the impact is really weak. Usually it's not existent. And okay, so we do this exercise again to go to entrepreneurs and ask them. So we ask these entrepreneurs, well, do you see any value added by these public VC investors, or in general by the VC money that you got, apart from the money? I mean, of course, money is good, and you are happy that they gave you a few $100,000 or euro. But did you get anything else on top of that? For instance, did you get professionalization? So they helped your company to become more managerial in the way it is managed? Or did this VC really help you towards, I don't know, reaching an IPO, so listing on the stock market? Now, if you compare the answers of those entrepreneurs who got money from independent VCs, from those who got money from public VC, essentially there's a big difference. Entrepreneurs who got money from public VC didn't really recognize any value on top of money. Okay, we got money, but this VC didn't really help us in listing, didn't really help us in professionalizing, didn't really help us in hiring a CEO. So that essentially, in a nutshell, I mean, whether we believe or not of what entrepreneurs think they got, this is kind of informative. Well, in a nutshell, what we see here is that the value added by public VC is smaller than the value added by any other type of VC. The reason why I began saying that this evidence is nuanced is that actually we find some clue that public VC might have an indirect, very positive effect. We made this study about the innovative activity, so say it's patenting, by biotech companies in Europe. Now, what we see is that if you compare, this is essentially the patent stock of this company, so more or less how many patents this company have. Now, what you see there is the dark line is a company which got money from a private VC, so independent VC, corporate VC, so whatever, but for public VC. Now, what you see there is that you have a big increase in patent stock. So this means that a biotech company which gets money from VC, it's much more likely to have patents out there. So it looks like it's more innovative. If you take public VC, it's much weaker. But if you look deeper in the data, what you find is that the companies which really outperform are those which got money from both private and public, but where the lead is private. So if you see all the possible combinations of private and public VCs, the one which really seems to outperform the others is a combination of private and public VC, but only when the private is the lead investor. The same combination when the public is the lead investor is one of the worst. So it looks like, I mean, if you get money from public and private, where the private is lead, your performance is much better than if you got money from private only. So it looks like public VC has an indirect effect, which is an effect to amplify the value which a private VC can give you. And I mean, there are a few possible explanations. One is that, I mean, public VC has a longer term perspective, which helps, especially in biotech, where it really takes ages to get to a product. This longer term perspective, combined with the short term perspective of other VCs, I mean, short term compared to biotech times, really seems to be adding additional value to these companies. So there is some room for public VC, but only in particular cases. It looks like in other cases it doesn't really work that well. So here we are to a few questions which came to our mind. I don't know whether we want to go to the questions directly or we want to. Yeah, okay. I can start. Yeah, okay. We go through the questions and then just to get some feedback. So first question: which policies to reduce the cost for entrepreneurs to look for VC? We said that one of the reasons why selection seems to be poor in Europe is that good entrepreneurs don't look for VC in the first place. Now, you could solve this problem by reducing the cost for these entrepreneurs to look for VC. So you would get more good entrepreneurs looking for VC, so you would improve the quality of deal flow, and improving the quality of deal flow would attract VC, so you would move the equilibrium towards a good state. So first question, how can we get it? Second, is a more even development of VC throughout Europe, so a more even distribution of VC money throughout Europe, a sensible policy objective? Because it seems like it's an objective that we are actually pursuing, but I'm not really sure that this is a good idea. Third, how can entrepreneurial mobility be fostered? Because if VC is not, I mean, available evenly in Europe, then it means that a good entrepreneur must be willing to move to another country to get VC money. But how can we make it more likely? fourth, well, how do VC managers add value in Europe? I mean, we have some evidence from the project, but I'm sure that people here know much more than we do about what's going on really out there. Fifth, well, how different is the value added by public VC sector? I mean, is it only our findings which show that public VC is poorer in its ability to provide value, or this is kind of consistent with your evidence or with your idea? And essentially, what's the word of why do we have public VC? Should its localism be withered? So should we reduce its tendency to invest only locally? And if so, how can we get it? Because politically it's not easy. And should its activity be redesigned to give it its ambiguous effectiveness? What about other types of VC? We have lots of non-independent VCs in Europe. Is there room for an asymmetric policy favoring independent VC over other types of VC, since it looks like it's the most effective? So do we want the market in Europe to move towards a more IVC type of market, or we want to help this heterogeneity of investors? And, well, final point, well, we find that there's poor selection. Our explanation is about this thin market, but maybe that you have other and better stories to explain that. So, well, yes, I think I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. Now we are going to proceed to Pertti Valtone's presentation. He's going to present a new program in Finland to offer public sector backing to high-tech companies. So, you have your...
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pertti Valtonen. I work for the Finnish Ministry of Employment and the Economy. And I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences with you of the Finnish Business Accelerator program called VICO. The similarity of our VICO program with that of the VICO project is purely coincidental. Policy development is a cumulative process based on the results achieved, but also including mistakes learned about and based on continuous independent external assessments and benchmarkings. I will first give you a brief overview of the current status of startup finance in our country. The current VC market situation in Finland could much apply that of whole Europe. Public agencies, as we have heard here many times, cannot solve the problem due to reasons so aptly described of the VICO report and the project, and also analyzed in the first speaker this morning. The recently emerging phrase Finnish paradox raises the question of why Finland is unable to produce high growth firms despite of top ranking innovation system combined with a highly ranked education system. Something has to be wrong with our venture capital market. We do have adequate seed financing in our country, but such funding is mostly government-based. And also we do have adequate funding for expansion and buyout markets. However, in between, after the seed stage and before the expansion stage, we lack professional venture capital activity. In response, we have launched the so-called VICO Business Accelerator program to fill the gap, not with the capital, but with business experience and competence, by coaching startups to become investment ready and to raise them significant amount of first round financing. We still believe that private investors will return to investing in startups if such projects are sufficiently attractive to investors and if the firms are investment ready. Furthermore, we believe that we need the best and the most experienced talents and business people to coach startups to the point where they are investment ready. We also are confident that we can attract such business people by offering them proper incentives. Competence is much more sorely needed in startup growth and financing than at the later stages. VICO is a unique program since it was not possible to change the traditional incubators and incubator system to meet with the current challenges. We built a new program based on a wholly new concept. But we have been obliged to make compromises with the existing public financing organizations and current legislation, but we have managed to live with these. And you have pretty well analyzed these weaknesses in the VICO final report. Thanks to Tellerbo. The objective of the VICO Accelerator program is simple: to coach carefully selected firms to become investment ready. Further on, we aim to raise a significant amount of capital for the early growth of these firms. As a part of the government program's governance and execution, we have done a great deal of outsourcing. Neither we in the ministry nor the government's financial agencies wish to make the key decisions and selections. Instead, we let the private sector do that. However, we provide the selected firms with rather generous public funding and incentives for accelerator teams. We have noticed that government VCs can play a fairly modest role in shaping value-adding behavior in firms. For these reasons, VICO is not intended to be access to finance program, but rather access to competencies supported by government's financing and investments. Accelerators are not like consultants. An accelerator team member can be the managing director of the target firm during a transitional period, for example. In addition, they must invest their own money in the target companies. This acts as both an incentive for them and as a commitment. This is a list of current accelerators. Most of these are ICT and mobile related, but the sectors themselves were not selected by us. Instead, the key selection criteria were the experiences of the team members in high growth ventures and venture capital business. A later aim is that based on a successful track record, these teams can raise their own venture funds. Cleantech Business Accelerator has already raised a small €2 million fund, and Lifeline Ventures is in the process of raising €15 million fund. We know that these kind of small funds are against the theory, but they seems to work well so far. Furthermore, we are considering so-called asymmetric risk-sharing models to attract private investors. Here, it is important that the accelerator selects the firms to be coached. An accelerator will pick up only a few out of the deal flow amounting several hundreds per accelerator. Those selected will be financed by public agencies involved in the program. We think that the results achieved so far of the program are rather promising. Accelerator teams have succeeded in attracting investments totaling more than €60 million for their target companies within the first 18 months of the project. And most of the private capital comes from abroad, and most of this capital again comes from United States, which is also against theory to have a rather small amount of money invested in a small startup in a faraway small country like Finland. But it works in practice. Now this is a quick snapshot of some most promising firms coached by the accelerator teams. Maybe I have to have that most of these target companies are really startup. They have been created within 1 year or something like that. And this is the opportunity what makes it to accelerator teams easier to design and have an influence to the creation and value adding of the firms, because they have noticed that if the firm is established, it means that if those firms are older than 1, 2 or 3 years, it's much more difficult to have an influence to those firms. So better be early enough when you are coaching those firms to have an influence. And oh yeah, this is other companies, and this is the list of foreign investors, including really some prominent names. And really we have seen that these investments from abroad compensate the absence of a local VC. And here are some angel investors, also some prominent names. And here is, we have listed some obvious benefits for all the parties involved in the program. And here, in a nutshell, we have the policy indications from our VICO Accelerator program, which are, in my mind, much in line with the policy indications and recommendations of the VICO project. We also try to support high growth business development with other policy initiatives, such as co-financing, business angels, and running a business angels network. And the government also will consider tax incentives for business angels. So this is my presentation. Thank you very much.
We've seen this fits perfectly with the value-added perspective, because it focuses more on competence than on balance in itself. Regarding the topic of our speech, of our session, I want to highlight regarding the Spanish experience that, and not only the Spanish experience, that there is evidence of the outperformance of VC-backed firms. But there are three reasons for that. We spoke about selection, funding, and in addition to that, value added. Well, from the Spanish experience, I can tell you that we analyzed also selection, and there is no selection effect at all. Not with high tech, but with the overall sample. We analyzed or tried to separate value added from investments, and also by stage. And we found that funding is relevant both in startups and expansion stages, but not so relevant in various stages. Why? Because no funding is really going into the company, because it's a buyout. So you are buying all shares rather than inputting additional money. And regarding value added, we found that value added in startups was not always significant, and that could be done. That could be based on the heterogeneity of investments, high tech, low tech, and mostly low tech. And then the investors are not that able to provide this value added, maybe. But regarding expansion, we found that regardless of the industry type of company, we found that there was a significant effect of the investors in the development of the company, in addition to funding. So this is additional evidence which is completing the European evidence only based on startups, only based on high-tech startups. But now I want to move to the last question that Fabio was raising in his presentation, which is why we don't have selection and selection effect? Maybe any of you can have an opinion which is different or complementary to the one we had before. Daniel is not only representing his VC company, but also he's the chairman of the VC committee at the local Spanish Venture Capital Association, ASCRI, and also he belongs to the VC platform at the EVCA, so he's very much concerned about what's going on with the VC in Europe. What is your opinion about this problem of the lack of selection in Europe?
Well, so I think it's a tricky question. I was intrigued by when Fabio was explaining that many entrepreneurs don't go to VCs because they think that it is so scarce that they will not get it anyhow. So that I think that the first thing, and not only for this reason, for various reasons, but the first thing that we need to make sure we have is a VC sector that is strong enough and has enough presence as to make good entrepreneurs think that they will get financing. Because if one of the reasons is that they don't go that they don't even try, I mean, clearly we need to make ourselves stronger so that the perception from entrepreneurs is not this one. On the other hand, I don't know if there is probably some type of cultural thing which makes European entrepreneurs, or at least the Spanish entrepreneurs for sure, have a feeling of what success means, maybe different of what American entrepreneurs think. So I think that in the US, having a quick success and being a serial entrepreneur is highly seen. And maybe here, in general, many people think that building your own company without giving control or giving access to the capital to anyone else and being 100% owner of your company, that's, at least for some people, and very smart people, but that's how they would evaluate their own success. So I think that some European entrepreneurs might be more reluctant unless they see something very, very interesting in return. So I don't know. I think that making a strong VC sector and trying to work on these cultural issues might help. In any case, one idea that I think to me it's very clear, and I think that according to you, both of your explanation, it's coherent with that. I think that the private sector needs to be on the driving seat here. And I don't mean to make a political statement of this. I mean, it's not like I'm a Tea Party member or anything like that. But I think that in our specific sector, it's very important. First of all, because where the big money is in the private sector. So that anything that can help to make private money flow into venture capital, and I'm talking about tax incentives and maybe regulatory issues like pension plans, investment schemes, or insurance company investment schemes, or these kind of things. I think that anything that helps private money to flow into the venture capital sector makes a difference, because as I say, that's what can make the venture capital sector be much more powerful. And then because when we talk about selection and value added, at the end, if you have good selection and you are able to give a lot of value added to the companies in your portfolio, hopefully you will see that on the returns. And hopefully, if you get good returns, you will be able to attract money. So, in other words, I think that market forces, in this case, help selection and help value added. So I think that policies that make public money strengths what the private sector is doing, in general, should be a good idea.
Yeah.
Just one comment about what you said is that we found that there's a positive effect of value added, but unfortunately we are not analyzing performance, because the problem is you may add value, but then you are unable to exit successfully, and that's another issue, not for this session, but another issue about the venture capital industry. But I do agree with you that there's a problem, a communication problem, a cultural problem as well, both. And
bankruptcy is a problem in Latin culture. Welcome everybody, and thank you for inviting me to share these interesting conclusions. I think there is a tradition that the industry is very young here in Europe. I think it's a different tradition in investment here from the US, and I think also there is not enough participating in public to private programs. It's only private or only public, but the communication starts 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's very young. I think it's too much young to have any conclusion in all the process, because we have a very long-term process, and it's not conclusions about exits enough for me, in my opinion, to have a diagnostic, a proper diagnostic of what is happening with startups.
And so basically, do you agree that the VCs do add value? But I want to ask you, how do you rank the different sources of value that you saw in the slide that Fabio presented? Which are in which order would you rank these value-added activities in your portfolio companies, Daniel?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, adding value in portfolio companies is more, if you want, an art than a science. Okay, it's something that you have to learn, and it's a big part of this work. Okay, because being able to add value, and at the same time being able of making the management team feel not too much control, or that making them feel that they take their own decisions, that's something that you have to be very careful on driving. Okay, and this is something that I've been in this business for almost 10 years now, and I would say that one of the areas where I have had to learn more is in this one. So how do you do it? To make sure that you add value, you help the portfolio companies, but that the management team don't have a perception that you are too much there. Okay, so this is one part. It's something that you have to learn, and that requires a lot of balance. The second thing is that I think that specialization is extremely important, and this is, at least in our fund, in Nauta, is one of our main building blocks. We are very specialized. I think that unless you know very well the market, the technologies, the business models, it's very doubtful that you can add real value. I mean, you need to know the people in the sector that you can introduce to your portfolio companies, and you cannot not know all the sectors. So basically, you need to know the people in your relevant sectors. You need to know the technologies, you need to know the competence. So I would say that specializing is very important. From our point of view, opening doors is one very important thing that you can do as a venture capitalist. So making the good introductions in the good companies, this is something very valuable that you can add as a board member in your portfolio companies. This is one thing. Then I would say that if you are able to, in some cases, to open the eyes and make the entrepreneurs be realistically ambitious, that's also very important, making sure that they go, for example, to international markets, sometimes, as you said before, also because of language or regulation or cultural reasons. Some people tend to stay in their home market, and I think that, and especially in Europe, I think that making them see that there is no need to remain in your home market, that you can go to the US, or you can go to Northern Europe, or you can go to Asia or wherever, that's also important. So being able to make sure that they have this ambitious and realistic at the same time. And then I think that hiring the management team, the appropriate CFO, the appropriate CTO, the appropriate person for business development, that's probably the main places. I would say introductions, ambition in the business plan, and then hiring management team. But to do all of this, again, I think that specialization is absolutely important.
I think, yes, all sources for me are important because it's an equilibrium of all the sources you have point out. But I think is in our financial point of view, it's important to give to the team in the target company, to give to the team a financial point of view, because there is very, very important and is very different if the company is generating cash or not. So these two kind of working in financial will permit or not realize and accomplish the business plan. And I think that is an important point that the VC, this financial culture, will add to the team, to the company.
And what are the difference when you were in the public sector and with regarding the public sector approach to value added and the private sector approach?
I think the public sector could not attract talent enough with salaries paid to people on VCs or public VCs, and that's why value added is totally different, and that's why Danny has told us that the driver seated has to be reserved to private. I think that is the main reason. I don't know.
Probably.
And what about stability? I mean, in the public sector, because stability, because your team, for instance, was disappeared when the government changed.
Yes.
So the learning curve was already passed or close to being passed, and then the team disappears totally.
Yes, this is another fact, because of you have found that public VC is not adding so much value as private. That's why the policies are make it in short-term basis, and our industry works in a long-term basis. So we need a stability minimum 10 years, during 10 years, and that is a big problem, I think. The running of policies and not giving a stability in the public sector, helping the private industry.
One more question, which is more anecdotal. When we speak about our value added, we have to look at the portfolio size and at the number of investment managers. What do you think that is a good, a nice ratio between investees and investment managers? I mean, to be able to add value, really.
Well, probably Nauta is not a good example of that, because we have somehow some over-investment. We are 6 partners and we have 18 portfolio companies, so it's an average of 3 companies per partner, which is, I guess, probably too low. But I would say that being able to add value, if you have more than 5 or 6 companies per partner, it's extremely difficult. I mean, if you wanted to be really effective, you need to know the sector. As I said before, specialization is very important, and you need to know very well the team, you need to know the company, you need to follow the day-to-day, because otherwise it's, I mean, if you devote a couple of days per month to a company, maybe you can do something, but it's difficult, or it's at least very doubtful that you can add real value to that company, I think.
And Pertti, what do you think about this ratio?
Yes, what comes to our VICO Accelerator program, we have a restriction set in that one accelerator member team can manage maximum 3 companies. maximum 3. Because we have the experiences of the past incubator system in Finland that there were more than and also experiences from our seed public seed fund that there were close to 10 or even more companies to be managed by one manager, and it's impossible to add any value.
Maybe because of the low value added in public sector funded, because they have sometimes very large portfolios.
Yes. The hands-on word is very important. Look at the business angel. Take one investment at each year, about to look after that investment.
Okay, I think it's about time because to open the to the audience or to other questions or to raise new points to the panel. So if any of you have new questions, Annalisa, please to the second micro, to Sonia to bring the second micro, please. I can from the first.
Yes, well, I have a couple of comments and one question. Well, it seems from this very interesting discussion that there are two main problems with public venture capital. First one is that they are not able to attract top talent. So it's a human capital problem, basically. And in a business like venture capital, where human capital matters a lot, this is a big problem. The second problem, I find it very interesting, this idea that you need to be specialized. In fact, this is one of the difference between venture capital and other financial intermediaries. Sure. And then this is totally at odds with the idea of having local or regional venture capitalists, which are confined to invest in sometimes in a small region with a limited deal flow and with no specialization. I mean, they cannot be specialized both geographically and in terms of industry or specialization. So I think we have to take it as a matter of fact that these are two big pillars of why we find this male result for public venture capital. And quite interestingly, we have been doing, not in the VICO, well, VICO, it was about venture capital, fine. And we find that as far as public venture capital is concerned, there is some limited effect in the very early stage and probably only in biotech, okay? Well, quite interestingly, we have been doing some work on subsidies, okay? So the effect of subsidies, well, basically the same variables that we have analyzed in the VICO project. And we find something very similar, I mean. Subsidies have some limited positive effect only if they are assigned in the very early stage of the life of this type of company. So it seems to me that basically public venture capital was a subsidy. Yeah. Okay, so there is no addition of value added. So it was subsidy packaged in another way, but to some extent was subsidies. Then I come to the question. The question is to the very interesting this Finland case, and it seems to me that one of the assumption, one of the bet of this accelerator policy is that for governmental agency, in this case Takesh, if I remember correctly, for Takesh it was easier to examine application from accelerators than to examine application from startup companies. And to some extent it makes a lot of sense because accelerator, if you examine different startup companies, every startup company is a different story. There are different entrepreneurs, they have different business ideas, there are different technology, different markets, and so forth and so on. While if you examine accelerator, you are examining the same type of animal. Is this one of the reasons why, the project was more successful, in the sense that you basically, instead of examining companies, you are examining just one type of company, the accelerator?
Yeah, I think that you get the point because if we take Tekes, so they are assessing, you know, as you told, they receive a lot of applications and they will evaluate those applications and then make a decision. But if instead a VICO Accelerator team will, you know, analyze, as I told, not tens but hundreds of companies, not applied for money, but they have, you know, because they know the ecosystem and in their narrow field or specialization, they have, you know, reached to get through their networks access to rather all emerging new projects and companies in Finland, and they make this selection work. And Tekes, you know, and they select, you know, only a few, let's say 1, 2, 3 out of hundreds, and they present them to Tekes. And Tekes' task is only to, you know, more or less, yeah. Of course, it was, you know, in the beginning, it was a little bit, you know, difficulties, I mean, cultural difficulties. So, can private company make decision instead of government agency? But we have solved this problem, you know, in a soft way, so to say.
I would like to make a point. I think that, to me, another very, very important thing that when we talk about policies to enhance venture capital in Europe is very important, and Fabio also was talking about this before, is that we need to make as much as possible a unified European market. Okay, I think that critical mass is extremely important. One of the reasons is what you were saying when you were implying that either you are specialized from an industry perspective or from a geographical perspective. So if you want to be specialized from an industry perspective, you need a broad geographical market. Okay, so this is the first thing. But then there is another thing which has to do, and I know it's not the subject of this discussion today, but I think it's extremely important, and you were saying it before about exits. For example, when I look at NASDAQ, I feel a lot of envy, because if we look at the IPO market for small caps in Europe, every national market is trying to have its own market, and this is clearly harmful. I mean, at the end, if we have in Madrid the MAB, in London the AIM, in France the Alternex, and Germany whatever, you know, that makes that people, you cannot have a specialized analyst, you don't have liquidity, you don't have critical mass. So I think that, and also even if you look at trade sales, if a company from Finland can come to Spain and buy a startup in Spain, or a company from Germany can go to UK and buy a startup from UK, that also creates a much more liquid market for a startup, which is critical. And I think it's one of the keys of the success of the VC market in US if you compared it with Europe. So I think that everything that could be done to make a unified market, both in terms of VC investments, so VCs from a part of Europe investing in another part of Europe, and also from the exit points of view, IPOs and trade sales, that's absolutely key.
But that was done in the 90s with the ISDAC, and it didn't work because to have such a market, you also have to have something which is cultural, which is or based in a cultural difference, which is supply and demand. We simply don't have supply and demand for such a market, as we saw with the experience.
Yes.
So maybe policies should try to focus on maybe creating first supply and demand, and then the markets will appear and will develop alone, and then we'll have to regulate them But unless we focus on developing supply and demand for such market, I don't think we are not going to have an IPO market in Europe at all. And for developing such measures, we have to ask ourselves how many of us have shares of unlisted firms. Not many. And so, who's going to invest in that in such a market if no individuals are interested? So you have to make this, to create some incentives for individuals investing directly in unquoted firms, and you would increase the flow of capital to SMEs, and you increase the amount of shares spread around lots of people, and then you would be creating one of the two sides of the market, and one of these two sides of the market is there, and then companies will be interested in issuing shares and sending and trying to raise money in those markets, and then we would have the market. But now, if you create, we created the second market in Spain in 1986, then the new market, and now the alternative investment market, and we are not very original at all, because we took the name from the surviving market from the 90s, the London market.
Yeah.
So, mercado alternativo bursátil in Spanish is alternative investment market. Yeah. So it's stupid to keep on making the same mistakes once every 10 years. So we have to think about how to enhance supply and demand, to create the supply and demand, and then. But I totally agree with you. Unless we have exits, it's impossible to have a large and liquid and self-regulating VC market.
But what is important is that IPOs manage all the liquidity in the curve.
So we've seen that coming back to the topic, which is value added. We've seen that the value added is different in public sector and private sector. How do you, if you write in the letter in Christmas, what would you ask in terms of incentives in order to get some recognition for this additional value added that, as private investor, you both can provide? How would you ask? What do you ask in terms of incentives or policy measures?
Well, in terms of incentives, the main one is the carry interest. I mean, so knowing that as a market standard, we get about 20% of the capital gains is a very strong incentive.
A good incentive, yes, I agree.
to add value to portfolio companies. I would say this is the first one. Then, and this is probably a controversial question, but something that it's interesting at least to take a look at is to what extent we can have asymmetric returns for private and public money. And this has a lot to do with subventions and grants and these kind of things. But at the end, I think that if we try to attract, as I was saying at the beginning, private money to the venture capital sector, one of the things that the public sector can do is to think about having these asymmetric returns. That means that at the end, if the thing is successful, the company is successful, every euro that the private investors have invested in that company has a return which is higher than every euro that public sector has invested in that. So
you're meaning when you co-invest with the private, with the public investor, there shouldn't be an even distribution of profits. Well, so you should get you should leverage your return based on the return of the private public investor. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
No, because I totally agree, personally agree with this view. Why? Because if there's a gap with VC funding, you can fill it with public money. We found that when you invest public money, allocation is not efficient. and value added is not efficient. So you have to try attract value from private investors, but they are not going to get in if the only thing that the public money is going to provide is reduction in the risk, because you are going to share the risk with another investor. If things go well, as we have found, it's basically because of the value added by the private investor. So one way of attracting public money and also competence would be to share part of the returns of the public sector investor with and to leverage. In this way, we will be doing two things: reducing the risk of the investor because losses are heavy, and leveraging the return in order to increase the return in the portfolio as a whole of the private sector. I wrote this about in 1999, but nobody trusts me.
No, and I think that, again, I mean, I know this is controversial, but there are some Spanish public investments where they tell you as a private investor, we will co-invest with you. Okay, so, but since you are the one that knows the sector and knows how to select the proper company, how to add value to the companies, we will co-invest always with you. Okay, but in the same conditions, you know. So then I'm not making my work for free for my investors, but I'm doing my work for free to some extent to public investors. So that's why.
Two interventions.
How easy would be to structure the discrimination between public funds and private funds? Because although it makes a lot of sense, the practical measures to implement it would be quite difficult. Because as you said now, they want to invest in the same terms. So,
Yes, in my view is if you set up a public, I'll pass the microphone to you. In my view, if you create some sort of fund of funds, this a public sector fund will invest in your fund, not in the company, in your fund with a special relationship regarding returns. I mean, mostly sharing the carry with the private with the general partners. So part of the carried interest should go to the general partners, in addition to the rest of the investors, in order to increase the return of the fund for private investors. Why? Because otherwise they're not going to invest in this type of startups. So in this way, if you work pari passu, then you are not going to attract you are not adding anything but money, and they're not interested in investing there because they lose money. And so you want to attract money for that, then you have to pay for the additional value added and the competence and the knowledge in allocation of the money.
Public must lower the risk aversion of private venture capital, and that works as an option, one cap and floor, and to help private go through more companies in portfolio, other companies that, in other terms, they don't invest.
Otherwise, as Daniel said, you are doing your work for free.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
The concept is very clear, but the word is about the practical implications, because
Through a fund.
we always controversy
It should be difficult one by one basis, investing through investment, but through a fund.
through a fund of funds, you somehow overcome this
Yes.
This is one way, and another way is to help in selection, because in US you have a better selection, I think, in my opinion, because there is many initiatives in MIT or in Berkeley or in Stanford. So a program we have put, and unfortunately is not alive, we have managed with the university, is to create technological trampolines in order to have more spin-off from the university and to help the universities to invest on the spin-off in order to have more pyramidal basis, more number of starting companies, and then private venture capitals could make a better selection.
Massimo had another question.
Yes. Well, no, it was basically on the same mood, and my
Yeah.
I mean, I would be curious to know what you would prefer as a scheme which give you a larger share of the a scheme which give you a larger share of the positive return, or a scheme which shield you from write-offs?
I think it has to be the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very clear on that one. Yeah. Yes. I think that we need to take risks, and we need to be compensated if the risks go well. I think that aligns much better incentives.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as far as I know, in Sweden, there was some sort of, the names they used was conditional loan, which are a type of, basically the reverse of a convertible bond.
Mm-hmm.
So it's equity which, if it's successful, is transformed, basically it gives you an option to buy back the interest at a predetermined rate of return.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to say before that one way to do what you were asking before is through a fund of funds scheme. The other one, if you are talking about co-investment in the same portfolio company, one coming from a private venture capital, another one coming from public sources, obviously is looking at ways that you leverage the company. So in other words, if we invest 1 million and there is another million from public sources, the 1 million coming from public sources is not 1 million of equity. Maybe it's 350,000 that go exactly in the same conditions, and 650,000 is a loan or somehow converts to a loan in some scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Bertie, you have the...
Yeah. We have created and consider in creating more incentives inside VICO Accelerator program. So when I already mentioned VICO Accelerator team managers, they have to invest their own money in target companies, and when they are early stage companies, average age is 1 year or less, then the value of the company is rather low. We can say that in average it's 1 million euro, and so they typically invest 100 from 100 to 200,000 euro per company, and they get ownership in that respect. And then in addition, and it's an incentive to increase the value of the company, and then at the same time, the increase the value of their own ownership for later exits, thinking for later exits. And in addition to that, also when government's seed fund invests in their target companies, they get ownership typically, let's say, from 5 to 10%, and it is decided that the VICO team can buy the ownership, the shares from government seed company at the price of fixed interest rate later on. So this is incentive for the VICO Accelerator teams. And then in addition, we are just now considering that what comes to VICO, the own funds created by VICO teams, we are considering an asymmetric risk-sharing model in a way that private investors, we the capital will be paid first back, and after that, government investor or our seed fund.
So I mean, you have stock options, like stock options in.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes.
That's a good idea.
Good idea. Yeah.
Cornelius, yes?
I think that the experimentation on this micro level is very important. I think to have an exchange of views and an ongoing discussion on and a competitive argument about what is the best solution on this direct investment level, what the private side is doing, what the public side should be doing is very important. But I would like to draw attention to one level higher for the fundraising abilities of European private venture capitalists. And I think there is also a role that we should not forget. What is the LP base thinking of a European venture? And when we're talking about the critical side, the critical mass of European venture, it's really about how they can finance themselves through LPs. And I think what's really lacking in Europe, if you compare it to the United States, for instance, you have university endowments that cannot afford not to invest in venture capital because it's by definition, it's part of their culture in their university to support high-tech startups no matter what. And they're not so much concerned, but let's say, about the average performance. It's a Stanford endowment. If they wouldn't invest in venture capital, most of the alumni would burn down their building. And I think, so we have to be very, also kind of think about ways, how can we make European venture more attractive, and also in terms of its size, more attractive to an LP base, be it from Europe or be it from all across the globe. Where are the opportunities in Europe that the selection of a private VC that is based in Europe with the European expertise has a competitive advantage? So in that respect, I would perhaps encourage not too much micromanage things on the ground, but trust in the abilities of the seasoned venture capital players that have been emerging over the last couple of years through some really tough times. But those that made it, I think, have an amazing resource that we can further benefit on top of it. And if we, let's say, find a fund of funds scheme where LPs, if they allocate a certain percentage into European venture, get it matched from the public side already on the LP level, then we can actually almost entirely delegate the responsibility on the private side on what investments they want to do as just an alternative concept, how you bring in the public. So I just wanted to introduce that also. As I said, I mean, it's very important that on the micro level we have this open discussion. I think it's very important to discuss controversial things about asymmetric benefits from these investments on this deal-by-deal level. But at the same time, we should not forget about the LP level, which is really crucial, and I think where I see the biggest work to be done in Europe at the moment.
I couldn't agree more. I think that if you look at the individual factors that we need to in order to enhance the venture capital market in Europe, the first or maximum the second or third one is how do we do it to make private money, private LPs, to go into venture capital. I think that everything that can be done in this respect is absolutely crucial.
There is a cultural fact here, because I think in Europe no one could bet on Amazon, for example, and that's why we don't have certain enterprises here, because the maturity period is too long and nobody could assume this risk in Europe. I think it's a fine line.
No, but I think that any, for example, again, talking about tax incentives, regulatory issues, because at the end, cultural factors is what we would like to move, because it's really powerful, but it's much more difficult. How do you do that? How do you change the culture? That's a long-term view. Yeah. But there are some specific actions that I think could be done in terms of tax incentives and regulatory issues.
I just have two comments. The first one is for Daniel. When you say that this asymmetry is a bit of a provocative idea, I just wanted to comment. I work for the European Commission, and when we discuss policy, this is, of course, one of the options that we are discussing. It's not so provocative. And as we see from Finland, it is appearing in some form in some public programs already, because I think we are well aware of the problems you describe. And then, just picking up on what's been said, in fact, I think it's important to consider this asymmetry both on an asymmetric distribution of the upside, but also protection from the risk. But of course, that is dealing with two different problems. As Cornelius said, if you look at the protection from risk, so to speak, that will attract more investment because from LPs, because basically what you do is you provide them certain level of protection from risk, but that has to go hand in hand with then an asymmetric sharing of the upside to attract the best fund managers. Ideally, you should be able to get the best fund managers and to also be able to get them the largest possible sum of money that they can manage, because then you maximize the efficiency.
But it's difficult to combine both.
Yes.
It's still difficult.
Yes.
And I'll tell you that if you stick only to the insurance part, you fail.
Yeah.
Why? Because the big thing about the returns in venture capital industry in Europe is not about the number of failures, which is similar to the American experience.
Yes.
The difference that the 1 out of 10 that in America succeeds multiplies 50, 100 times, and in Europe 3, 5 times. That's the big difference. So if you stick on the insurance part, you fail. So I'm more in agreement with Daniel that we should focus on the upside. Because the upside, if the return is sufficient enough, will cover for the losses as well.
Yes.
Any more questions, Ula?
Yes.
It's not a question, it's more a comment concerning the discussion that you had on exits. We know that alternative markets are very important, and that it's not only an exit opportunity for investors, it's also for the firms, it's kind of an event for the next fundraising, for the next rounds. And over the last 5 years, we had discussions with most of the stock exchanges in Europe, those having the IPO markets. We did not focus on trade sales as the VICO project is suggesting. Anyway, and on the IPO side, these stock exchanges, they did not show any interest, what was the Commission proposal, to harmonize the markets and therefore to help the early stage SMEs. So we've been trying to push the idea, and with the discussions we saw that there is, like, each of them is protecting their own market, and new IPO markets are actually being created. Therefore, now we are trying to at least push for more networking among them, and for them to jointly present the listing requirements, to jointly inform the potential SMEs about options that they might have, and also to get more investors on that market. So I agree with the ideas that you have. The exit markets are so important, and I'm just trying to make the point here that trying to harmonize them, it's actually a way that we cannot go, because there is no interest on the IPO market side. So at least with the networking and of their jointly prepared listing requirements, we are trying to help the SMEs and also the investors.
Just a small comment just to add on what Ula has said. It is the case, even though as a part of the SME Financial Action Plan, I'm Jose Moncada from the European Commission, there is an intention to reduce a regulatory burden for small companies trying to list in markets, amending or reviewing the transparency requirements of the Prospectus Directive, Transparency Directive, and the MiFID Directive. So there is this idea is as well part of our policy.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I wanted to add to this listing issue. Well, we have one case, which is Israel, in which venture capital developed initially in a country where they had no stock exchange for high-tech companies. And how they solved it, well, these companies just listed on the NASDAQ. So what we could consider. I mean, why don't European high-tech, very good companies just go list on the Nasdaq? And if there's some problems in doing that, one policy which could help is to help these companies list where the money is, rather than building our own stock market if we can't manage. So that would be an alternative.
Yeah.
If we can't really manage to build our own stock exchange, use someone else's.
Well, or on the other hand, as a practical matter, one debate that happens on Spanish companies, Spanish technological companies, is it better to go to the Madrid alternative investment market, or is it better to go to the AIM in London?
Yeah.
And this is something that many companies consider.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
do I need to go to Madrid? Well, maybe even if I'm in Madrid, I can go and list in AIM if this is going to be better.
Yeah, especially for IT, where your customers are not really local, but
Yeah.
they're everywhere.
No, but I agree that anything that can be done to harmonize to the maximum extent, and I understand the political difficulties that there are, and the national, every nation trying to look for their interest. But I think that anything that can be done so that it is to the maximum extent possible a unified market will be very helpful.
Yes. Not only on the top, business angels tax regulation, this is very important to have an harmonization.
Okay, thanks a lot for interesting discussions, and we are on time, which is strange. So we'll try to be on time because we have the keynote speaker at 11:30. So we have the floor -1, the coffee break now for all of you. So I'll meet you in 30 minutes here. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for coming, Daniela, and getting up today at 5, and you two from Barcelona and you from Finland. Thank you all for attending.